Fear is a tool. But when that light hits the sky, it's not just a call. It's a warning. I've been trying to reach you. Find the gun! This is about a king, and Riddler's the match.
Aloha, this is Trinidad the Island Man, your Island Man, coming to you live once again from beautiful Hawaii here on the island of Oahu, bringing you, yes you, the best movie reviews on the entire island of Oahu. And yes, this is Trinidad the Island Man, your Island Man. And today, Friday, March 5th, I am bringing you the Batman review. Now, this stars Robert Pattinson, Zoe Kravitz, Colin Farrell, and Jeffrey Wright, just to name a few. Pretty much stellar all-star cast. And, well, remember our rating scale. Shock a thumbs up. It's good, I recommend it. Shock a thumbs down, it's junk, I don't recommend it. And, well, without further ado, it is a shock a thumbs up. Now, full disclosure here, I was not looking forward to this movie. I really didn't want to like this movie. I'm not a big fan of Robert Pattinson, having seen him from the Twilight days, not really seeing him from anything else. Yes, he's done some good artsy movies. He was good in Tenet, I will give him that. And he plays a decent Batman in this movie. Bruce Wayne, I feel not so much. Mainly because we don't see a lot of Bruce Wayne in this. And then also because, what we were supposed to get with the Ben Affleck standalone, directed by, starring Ben Affleck, Batman movie, kind of from the Arkham games, versus... Slade Wilson, would have been that much more. But this one is still a decent enough movie. Coming in at 3 hours, being directed by the Planet of the Apes movies director. I can't remember his name. And I'd say I'm pretty much the general movie-going public there, who's not like enamored with movies. I didn't care for this guy's Planet of the Apes movies. I didn't really like them, and I feel that the last Planet of the Apes movie, War, was a real letdown because it really didn't get into War of the Planet of the Apes like it was teased. And we saw a lot of action in this movie. From the trailers, from the Batman trailers. We saw the machine guns. We saw that awesome car chase in the Batmobile with Batman, Robert Pattinson, against Colin Farrell's The Penguin. And what more can I say than that? When there is some action scenes, it is spot on. There is no fight, I think, in this movie that rivals the Ben Affleck Batman versus Superman fight scene that we got in the warehouse with, the terrorists. So on par with that, it is a step down, but it is a step up from every single else, all the Nolan films, from the Keaton films, and the other Batman iterations, of course. Where would I put this movie? Because that is the confusing thing about this movie. I was a Batman fan early on, even more so than Superman. Spider-Man became my number one hero, but Batman, who was the number one until Spider-Man came around and along back when I was a kid, was my number one. And then he fell. He's probably, was down in there. He's still probably my number one DC hero. And it's been hard. It's been a long road for Batman in the movies. From Nolan to the Snyderverse in the iterations. I loved the Batman the Animated Series. I love Batman Beyond. The other cartoon series, The Batman, I didn't really care for. And this is kind of taken a lot of liberties from that animated cartoon, along with Hush from the comics, where we see the Riddler not in his question mark outfit, not as zany as he has been portrayed in the past, both from the 66 television show, the movie, and the comics. Much more so of the gnarly, gritty version from Hush, where the Riddler takes on that persona and starts this elaborate plan to get Batman and his allies and seek revenge on them, along with other people of the city. And this movie takes a lot from the Hush storyline. The problem with this movie, the number one flaw of this movie, is one, that it's 3 hours, and there is, despite some good action, not as great as, the warehouse scene with Ben Affleck, but still better than any of that we've seen in the Nolan or the other Batman movies. But because it is 3 hours, there is a lot of world building, a lot of dialogue, a lot of backstory that has to be fleshed out. Fortunately, they have taken a cue from the Marvel universe, from Disney Marvel, and not done another origin story. We do not see a childhood Bruce Wayne falling in the cave and being inspired by the bat. We've had enough of that. We just get full-on Batman, some brief moments of Robert Pattinson as Bruce Wayne, enough to reflect his angst and basically the fact that he doesn't care for his Bruce Wayne persona, being much more comfortable as Batman, walking around as Batman. And that's one of the problems with this movie, is that it's hard to know where it fits in the continuity. This Batman walks around. He's like, "Hey, Commissioner, what's going on?" Saying hi, growling, scowling at other police officers just walking by on the street. And it's like, okay, at first he's the Batman that crouches in the shadows, hides. He disappears when the police go to look back and say, "Hey, Batman, hey, where'd he go?" He does a little bit of that, and then all of a sudden he's like, the police seem to call him in. Commissioner Gordon, who may or may not be commissioner, he's like a detective, I think. It's early in his career, early in Batman's career here. But apparently he's got such a rapport with at least half of the police community that they call him in to consult on these crimes that the Riddler is doing. And this is the first introduction of the Riddler, so, we don't know who the Riddler is. He doesn't know who the Riddler is exactly. It's very much, people have compared it to a Seven kind of vibe, as he's killing off prominent members of the Gotham elite, mayors, other rich people, crime bosses, etc., all connected to a mafioso crime drug bust that the police had done years and years ago. Saying that everyone is lying about it, that there is some unknown, undiscovered truth that has to be revealed. And the Riddler basically leaves these clues to have the police and Batman do his work in finding out who is behind this police city corruption / teaming up with the mob bosses to run this drug empire in Gotham and take it down, get his personal revenge. We're not exactly sure. Through a lot of it, it looks like maybe the Riddler's, like Batman, is doing this out of some type of beneficial thing for the public. But as we find out as it moves along that 3 hours arc, that he's ultimately just out for his own personal revenge. Unlike Batman, where, they try to really steer it that, they're kind of the same, Batman and the Riddler. Batman's causing all this crime, causing these imitators, and they go to show that in the movie. With, they say crime is going up since Batman's arrival. He's not making an impact into crime. Like they're going to balance it out with Bruce Wayne's altruism, and that's what he's going to discover at the end of this movie, is that he needs his Bruce Wayne persona to be the public face, where Batman is the hidden in the shadows, vengeance driven, tear into the crime, but also give people hope as the Bruce Wayne persona. It is alluded to that in this movie, but it never reaches that point. Bruce Wayne, and they set it right up on a silver platter that, oh yes, Bruce Wayne is going to come out. Robert Pattinson's like, okay, I admit I need the Bruce Wayne persona to do altruistic good in the city, to stop the crime before it begins, to aid against poverty. He seems to come to that realization, but he never comes out and says it. They never make that final, click of the connection. It's just alluded to. And we see Batman helping people. There is a very much Nolan-esque Dark Knight Rises thing that happens to the city, a trauma, a big disaster that takes place, man-made disaster that takes place to the city, and Batman is working beside police, rescue crew, pulling people out of rubble, etc. Something we hadn't really seen Batman do in the movies. In the comics, yes, he's been that persona, but never in the movies. And I think that's a tone that they fail to really elaborate on in this movie. And Matt Reeves, I think, is the director, the Planet of the Apes director. He fails to properly show that. That transition from the shadows that Batman needs to still come work into the light, and especially the Bruce Wayne persona. And that is the failing that this movie does. That is the ultimate breakdown of this movie, is that it does not transition well. It does not clasp between a Bruce Wayne and a Batman, which is a subtle thing. Burton's, Michael Keaton's Batman accomplished this. I would say Ben Affleck's Batman accomplished this. Batman Bruce Wayne, who was a really good Bruce Wayne and a really good Batman, from what we had seen from his movies. Justice League, Batman versus Superman, etc. But it fails in this movie, despite the lengthy, long runtime that Matt Reeves gives this movie, that gives Pattinson the opportunity, the length to kind of work through all this and connect it, but it doesn't. It fails on that. But it's still a shock of thumbs up, because the overall story is a positive one. The action, when there is action, is a good interpretation of that action. But again, just a little weaker than what it would have been for Batman versus Superman, or what we would have gotten in a standalone Ben Affleck Batman movie, I feel. Perhaps I'm judging this too harshly, this movie. I'm still giving it a shock of thumbs up. Will I see it again? Maybe. Definitely on streaming. Will I pay to go see it again? Once, I think, was kind of enough. I got the gist of it. They definitely, before this movie came out and during the filming of this movie, they were saying that this was going to be a standalone, one-off Batman, like the one-off Joker movie. However, by the end of it, and I think by the overall positive reception that the audience will have with this movie, despite its flaws, despite the confusion of where this fits in the continuity, that they will continue on with this, and Robert Pattinson will get a sequel movie. They leave it open. There's talk of a Catwoman. Zoe Kravitz does an excellent job. This is the best that I've ever seen her. I'm not a fan of her work. I'm not a fan of her father's music. I like a couple of his songs, but I'm not rushing out to see his concerts. She's cute in this film. Definitely better than Anne Hathaway. Strikes a good balance from from the Batman Returns kind of Catwoman. So there is talk of a standalone series or alternate movie with her, which would be good to see. Jeffrey Wright does a good police commissioner. Colin Farrell does a fantastic job as the Penguin. It's funny that being in total disguise, unrecognizable as his pretty boy Irish self, can get him such acclaim. But he definitely does well in this movie, and it sets him up as the next larger crime boss in Gotham, very much following the suit of the comics with the Penguin, from low-level crime boss to larger Lord of the City crime boss. So that is still in play, and we can look forward to that. And, this movie, spoilers, this is going to be a spoiler. They set up a Joker in Arkham kind of a thing. So we see the Joker, and at first, talking to the Riddler, because the Riddler is stopped, he's not killed, he's put in jail. And so where this fits definitely feels like after the Nolan movies. Even though this is supposed to be the Batman still new to the world, still new just 2 years into Gotham, still new with working with the police, one could watch the Nolan films and move to, okay, Batman survived, or a new Batman survived the nuclear explosion at the end of Dark Knight Rising, and we have, Heath Ledger's Joker, who this seems to be a portrayal of, kind of a combo of Joaquin Phoenix and a Heath Ledger Joker combined. We don't really see him, but we hear him, and his inflections, his tones vary between a Joaquin and a Heath Ledger Joker. So they're playing it very much like that. And the events that the Riddler sets up with this anarchy throughout the city, chaos taking over, very much a Jokerish theme from that billion-dollar movie Joker, Joaquin Phoenix movie that had come out a few years ago. So they're definitely trying to loosely connect it to the other films without really saying that, yes, this is where it is, which again leaves it confusing to the mass audience. There are several points in the comics that follow where this story is going and where the story is taking place, and you can pluck them out. Hush being the most significant Riddler story, probably, which inspired this movie directly. So you can see that it is grounded in Batman mythology from the comics, but still loose enough to be kind of confusing and floating to wherever they want to put it. Whether that means a Justice League in the future, I don't know. We don't know. There's no way to tell. But again, at 3 hours, that's going to hurt the overall box office for this movie because it is a long movie. There are long stretches of dialogue where there is no Batman serious fighting action. He's teased to be a great detective. We see the most detective work Batman has done since the very first 1988 Tim Burton Batman, that Robert Pattinson does as Batman, which is refreshing to see. But again, as people had pointed out in the trailers, they had solved these riddles. So it's like, is he really the world's greatest detective? And ultimately, he's still a little stumped by the Riddler and his motives at the very end. Some people feel that the last third act, or the almost a fourth act, is kind of tacked on, maybe as an action beat. It could have ended with the capture of the Riddler at the end, which you kind of sort of see in the final trailer. Which I've alluded, where they capture the Riddler in this cafe. He kind of turns himself in, almost, because he's completed his goals. He's done. And so the movie could have ended there, but they put on an extra little bit for some Flash, you know, which was nice to see Batman in action. But again, it is more confusing because he's still working directly with the police, even though the police don't fully trust him. Half the police force don't trust him. Half the police force want him in jail. There's a part in this movie where Batman he's not captured by the police, but he's being held after being injured by the police, where they could have locked him up, where it looked like they wanted to lock him up, they wanted to unmask him, but half of the other cops don't want to unmask him, and yet he's able to get out of the police station. Yes, it gets a little dicey there for Batman, but still, you don't feel that he's really in a threat. He's like a consultant, honestly. And it's like, what? Who's, you know, it's like almost the city's paying him a salary. It's like he's Sherlock Holmes. Hey, come in here and solve this problem for us, Batman. We don't know what we're doing, which is mostly the case in Gotham City PD. But overall, other than that, it is a shock and thumbs up for this movie. I'm starting to ramble now. I hope I haven't given you too many spoilers. There's a lot of good freshness out of this movie. Zoe Kravitz, the Penguin Colin Farrell, and a decent enough job by Patterson to warrant another film. All right. So those are my thoughts on the Batman. Overall, again, a shock and thumbs up. Check it out when you can, however you can. If not at the movies, definitely on streaming later on. It'll be on probably HBO Max eventually, within 2 months or so. And you'll probably enjoy it more there. Being 3 hours long, you can take your bathroom breaks, etc. All right. Mahalo and aloha.